I think that when you make your mental health and your mental issues specifically, not even just your mental health, but just the things that you're struggling with, when that becomes your identity, I think that that's an issue. I think therapy should be a tool that helps you, but it should be a tool that helps you to live your life and hopefully to someday need it less.
Okay, guys, welcome to the Broom Tree Podcast, episode 4, Jesus and Therapy. Now, I know this might be a little bit different, hearing my voice instead of Eric's. This is Amanda, by the way, if you haven't noticed, but it is an all-girls podcast today. I am here with my good friend, Julia Mansfield.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. I'm super excited about the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Therapy is just a really important topic in my life. I don't know. It's just something that I've dealt with in many seasons of my life. I think it's very important to discuss, and I hope that it reaches other people. I think it's something that maybe somebody might need to hear. But without further ado, I would like Julia to tell us a little bit about herself.
Well, hi, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here on the Broom Tree Podcast. I'm a huge fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
I was born here in Nashville, Tennessee. Actually, I don't know if you've ever said where you're based out of. Should I not say that?
No, go for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Nashville, baby.
I was born here in Nashville.
Yeah.
I grew up and I was homeschooled. I was one of those people. So
yeah, that's one of the things that we related on. We grew up very similar. Like anytime we would talk to each other, I'm like, we're kind of the same person.
Yeah, had similar experiences growing up.
Yeah.
And another similar experience we had was getting married really young.
Yes. Yeah.
I grew up and I married actually my high school sweetheart. My husband Ian. We met when I was like 14 and we got married when I was 19. And this year we'll be married for 8 years.
Yeah.
So we've been married for a second. We got married really because we're the same age. So we got married the same year. That's so crazy.
I know.
I forgot about that. Yeah, and I when we got married, I was obviously really young, and instead of going the traditional route and going to college for 4 years and then getting married, we decided together that he would go to college for 4 years while I worked full-time, and then I would go to college for 4 years while he worked full-time, and kind of pass the baton that way, just because financially, like, that's how we were able to get married young. Because we decided that no matter what we did in life, we just wanted to do it together. So
that's so cool.
That's how. So I'm 26 and I'm about to graduate from college. I'm graduating with a degree in pastoral care and counseling.
That's
which
so
is a sort of feels fake degree, but it is a real degree. It is a 4-year Bachelor of Science.
That's amazing. Though.
When I tell people like the title of it, they don't really believe that it's a real degree, but it is a real degree.
Yeah. Well, technically my master's degree is in business management for social innovation and nonprofit organizations, I think.
Oh, wow. That definitely sounds made up. So.
Yeah, for real. So
we're together on this.
Yeah. I just say I have a business degree. When anybody asks, I'm just like, it's business.
Yeah, no one cares. You have a degree. That's all that matters.
And I'm an art teacher now. So.
Exactly. There you go. I chose this field just because therapy has been super influential for me at different points in my life, and pastoring people in a combination with therapy and how those two subjects, theology and psychology, kind of intersect is really interesting and cool to me. Yeah. My mom is actually a counselor, so she was really inspirational to me in choosing this career path. So who knows where I'll actually end up with it, but hopefully this year I'll have a degree in
Yeah.
it, so.
So when's your actual like due graduation, like the goal graduation date?
December.
Okay.
And beginning of December
Okay.
is when
Yay.
that semester ends. So
Yeah. No, that's
fingers
so cool.
crossed.
I
I'm
know.
really excited.
Well,
So.
I'm super excited to have all of your academic knowledge here because
Yes, so extensive.
well, it really is. And like I wanted to preface like me talking about this subject is purely just my opinion and my experience. I have zero academic knowledge when it comes to therapy. I can just tell you from a person who has gone through many different seasons in her life and has gone through many different therapists and counselors, and some Christian, some not, some like I've been all over the place, and some good, some bad. And so it's just a lot of my own opinion and experiences. So it's good to have more of a educational, academic, professional opinion.
Well, I don't know how professional I am, but I
Fair.
will try my best. And honestly, like a lot of that is true for me too.
Yeah.
Because as one of the main things I've learned in my
Mhm.
academic process is just that there are so many different ways
Yeah.
to come at therapy and counseling
Yeah.
and psychology and mental well-being.
Yeah.
So your experiences really do
Right.
matter and color your philosophy on
Yeah.
this subject no matter what. So
Yeah. So that kind of leads me into kind of our first point. So what would you like define therapy to be? Because like my brain kind of goes like there's a difference between like counseling, and I don't have like the definitions written down or anything. There's a difference between like counseling and therapy. I feel like a counselor is more of somebody who kind of just like guides you throughout your life, and therapy is more of like a professional, like clinical, like let's get you through something. I think sometimes they're both, and sometimes they're either or. And I think sometimes that looks like a person. Sometimes that looks like, I know a lot of times that's a process like art therapy, or sometimes that's like a Bible study group, and I'm just sharing experiences with girlfriends, and I feel like I've resolved a lot of stuff by just talking. So what would be your like, I don't know, definition of therapy?
That's a great question. I
Going heavy right out of the gate.
I totally see where you're coming from, and I just don't know that I would have ever thought about it that way. Like, I feel like therapy and counseling get used so interchangeably.
Yeah.
But I do think they are different. And I do feel like, I don't know, you can get by using the word counseling, like, without having to have the credentials necessarily. You should not be advertising, like, therapy if you don't have, like, the credentials to back that up.
Yeah.
And I feel like counseling is used a little more loosely.
Yes.
And honestly, like, I feel like when it comes to psychological therapy, like it's really similar to physical therapy. Like I think that those things, like cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's some other acronyms that I don't know off the top of my head, but like there's certain like eye movement things that are more like clinical, like you were saying, that are everything to do with like our mental well-being, but aren't necessarily like talk therapy. But then there is talk therapy, and we call it talk therapy. So I feel like therapy does kind of is like the umbrella that has counseling kind of under it. Yeah. But therapy can be all kinds of things. I mean, people joke like, you know, like, oh, shopping is my therapy, or like whatever it is. So I think like there's kind of the general like therapy is the time or the practice that helps you cope with life and something. Yeah. But I think it can look different for a lot of different people.
Yeah. I agree. One of the things that when I was talking about or reading through all of this when we were going to talk about it, when I was thinking about like my experience with therapy, I was like, I go because it's to obviously work through really hard times that I've been through, traumatic experiences. But also I go to kind of prevent hard times from being harder. Eric always laughs at me, and I know we shared notes, so if you saw this, you were probably like, what the heck is she talking about? I always say it's like going to get my oil changed in my car. Like, we do that so that our engine doesn't like explode eventually in our car.
Right.
Like that's what I do with therapy. Like technically there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not going because I have like this big issue. I feel like whenever I tell people like, oh, I go to therapy, they're like, oh, what's messed up
What
with
are you
this
going through
girl?
right
Yeah,
now?
like we didn't know she had problems, you know? And I'm like, well, I don't, right now, technically, I don't really have any problems going
Right.
on. But I'm kind of like going for a checkup, you know,
Yeah.
and going to get my oil change, make sure
Mhm.
that I don't have something that I'm going to, you know, like maybe I'm not going to deal with something in the future that I'm just not uncovering, or that I'm just ignoring right now and sweeping
Mhm.
under the rug. And so I always say therapy is like getting my oil changed. So
I love that.
Yeah.
When I read that in the note, I'm like, that makes total sense. Like, I
Right.
totally get that.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, like, I think the main thing that is an obstacle for people getting into traditional therapy, which we will probably talk about this at some point, is like cost.
Yes.
I think that hopefully more people would go if cost weren't such an issue.
Right.
But I absolutely think that therapy should be like you're supposed to go get a check. People also don't get checkups from their physical doctors, which they should, but you should absolutely get like a checkup from a mental health professional.
Yeah.
Because like we all have different coping mechanisms. We all have different like weird little like things that we pick up throughout life, and a lot of times it is like things that we suppress or things that we're not paying full attention to, that it can be really helpful to have someone else kind of being like, hey, like I'm seeing some things here that like maybe we should fix that up. So I totally think that is like a really great way to go about it.
So like when I think about therapy, that is kind of like the main kind of where I go back to. It's like, yes, I have problems that I work through and I still do need to work through, but also part of it is just like routine, like
maintenance.
And I feel like if people are kind of like maybe embarrassed about it, like also, or like if you're judging somebody for going to therapy, they might not have issues. Like they might just be going because they're trying to be nice to their mental health, you know, like
right. Absolutely.
So, but that is one good thing that I'm glad you brought up, is the money aspect of it. Because I've been through seasons in my life where I wasn't able to go on the regular, because of the insurance didn't cover it, but I do believe it is, and maybe I've just been more blessed than other people out there. I've was surprised that it was more accessible than I thought it was. People made it seem very inaccessible. But like right now, when Eric quit his job and I went self-employed, like we had to go on TennCare, and TennCare actually provides free counseling.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so like if you are on TennCare, like anybody out there who would, you know, like if you live in Tennessee and you're on TennCare, they have free counseling that you can go out there. Like I was very surprised about that, you know, so I go like almost every other week for free right now, and it's like amazing.
That is incredible.
So, and almost every insurance that I've ever had has done it. Now I've been blessed with jobs that, you know, I've been able to have insurance to do that. But and then a lot of insurance, if you don't have insurance, a lot of places will do like the sliding scale method, which is very nice.
The last experience I had with counseling, the place that it was like a private Christian owned place, but they did the sliding scale, and that helped me tremendously because we don't make a ton of money, and so our insurance didn't cover the care that we got there, but because of the sliding scale, like we were able to afford it, and so there are places that will work for you.
And it's like, unfortunately, like that is one of the sad things, is like I've had to bounce around depending on my insurance, because like I've had one lady that I've loved, but right now she can't accept me because I have TennCare and all of this stuff, so I've had to go, and I've been going to this other lady, which she's just fine, but I do really like my other lady. So but you know, I've had to bounce around, but that is one thing that I would hope anybody listening right now that just like immediately like, oh, they're talking about therapy, I can't afford therapy, I don't want to listen to the podcast. I would encourage you to continue to listen and maybe exercise your resources that you might have, and if reach out, I might be able to help. I've been able to finagle my way around and get some free counseling, so no matter where I've gone. So I just wanted to pick your brain if you've ever experienced like any other methods of like just the cost wise of therapy, but the sliding scale method is the major one that I've heard of.
I don't know that I've ever timeline wise it's fuzzy. I don't know that I've ever had my insurance cover counseling before. I've paid for it out of pocket, and I've had like the sliding scale method, and I think those are the only two that I've experienced. So
so the next point that I was gonna touch on, I think I'm gonna have us talk about the main difference between a therapist and a pastor. I think this is where I want us to go next.
Okay.
It's technically not the next point in our notes, but I want us to go there.
I put it away because it was distracting me, so I'm like, I'm just going to let you tell me what we're going to talk about.
No. So the difference between a therapist and a pastor, which I know we kind of touched on, like, I feel like my mic, yes, it is definitely falling. I just like realized like it was in my lap. Like
I honestly I wasn't noticing it moving, but I was sitting here. I'm like, my mic is so much higher than her mic.
Yeah, so I just looked down. And I was like, why is it in my lap right now? Okay. Anyways, so especially in our upbringing of homeschool, church, all of that, I know you've probably at some point have gotten if you needed help in your life, you were probably just told to go talk to a pastor.
Yes.
And that they were going to give you the same experience that a therapist was going to give you. And I'm going to shoot that back at you. I'm going to save my comments because I have a lot of comments about that.
Okay. So. Well, I have definitely had that experience, and both are important, and both I am getting a degree in pastoral care and counseling.
Yes.
So I'm kind of like right at the crossroads there.
Yeah.
I don't really know what category I hope to fall into, but I do think that they're very different, and I think that they serve very different needs for very different times. And there is a time when you need to talk to a professional, a therapist and a professional. Right. And there's times when pastors are great. I think pastors are wonderful people that should be, a good pastor should be walking with you through your life. Yeah. Serving more of like a day-to-day relationship, and keeping in perspective all the people in your life, the entire situation that you're in, all that good stuff. And a therapist, their job is to focus on you. Yeah. And what you're going through, and how do we get you to a healthier emotional state. And yeah, when I was in high school, I needed mental health care, I think. And this is not a dig. If anybody is listening that knows me from the mat, like, this is not like I've grown up beyond this. This is fine. Yes. But I was experiencing some really scary things for a teenager. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of teenagers experience it, so I'm not trying to single that out. But I was just having some really dark thoughts. I was harming myself in different ways. And I talked to pastors. Like, I talked to the pastors in my life. And I think there was a lot that came from that was really good. Yeah. But I do think that it's like, looking back now, I'm like, if a 15-year-old is like telling you that they want to end their lives, like I think it's time to pass it on to a professional. Right. And I think that we have this idea that, like, because pastors have this, I don't know, we have this perception that they have this elevated relationship with God, that somehow qualifies them to coach us through mental health issues and issues with our mind and our brains. And again, I don't think, I'm not just trying to pastor bash. Like, I don't think that, I think that pastors can be very, very helpful in those seasons. But
Well, I think that, and I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
if
please
I
do.
did.
I'm having trouble like
Yes, no.
focusing in.
So I think that when I was thinking about all of this, the statement, and we have merch, that therapy is biblical. And I know like that's a bit pretty bold statement,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the verses that I wrote down when I was reading about this, and pretty much they're the common ones that you'll find if you basically Google verses about therapy.
Sure.
But like the main ones are like Proverbs 11:14, for lack of guidance, a nation fails, but victories won through many advisors. Proverbs 15:22, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Proverbs 13:10, wisdom is found in those who take advice. So like it's just obvious that we're created by God to have counsel in our lives, to we're better off to not just seclude ourselves and to just listen to our own advice and just do everything on our own. But the verses that I didn't include that also talk about counseling obviously talk about how the Holy Spirit is, is our ultimate counselor, which I think is obviously true and a very good thing to lean on. I think it can be overly used in the church when you're struggling with mental health, of like, the Holy Spirit's, just lean on him. Like, there's also other things that we need during that time. But I won't get into that right now. But with that being said, I think with pastors specifically, because they are so close to the Holy Spirit, they tend to take on that burden of being like, well, since I have the ultimate counselor, then I have this ability to counsel you through something. So I think that's kind of where that comes from, in my opinion anyway. So when I was reading this, of everything, of like, yes, the Holy Spirit is our counselor. And because pastors are so in tune with that, which God bless them, absolutely, I love that for them. But sometimes they take on the burden of the end all be all for everybody. And that just doesn't work. It's just too much. It's too much on them. And it's not enough for everybody. And that can tend to be harmful. And luckily, I've never experienced that in my own life. I've seen it experience, like your experience. I've seen it in Eric's, honestly. Eric has never, he has never gone to therapy. He's done church counseling, which he's spoken about in the podcast. And it's been good. It's been bad. Just like you said, it's been good in some seasons. It's been not so great in other seasons. I have asked him to go to therapy in other seasons of our life, and he's just not for it. I think it's harder for men to begin with. This is why it's an all women's podcast right now. Like, it's just that thing. But I honestly don't remember where I was going with that. Oh, yes. my train of thought just totally left me. But I've seen it in Eric's life, of taking, like, a pastor being like, you need to go to counseling within the church. You're having these problems. Taking on that therapist role in his life, when I think he may have needed a little extra. And now it, I think, has maybe, I don't know, kind of altered his view of therapy in a negative way, that has hindered me being able to get him to go in the future, unfortunately. And I don't think that it's just gone forever. I've got him to reach out to certain people, but he much rather talk to like a friend first before he ever like reach out to anybody because of negative experiences in the past. So,
and that can still be like helpful. I think that it's legitimate to like feel burned by counseling experiences or therapy experiences. And I also think on the other side of that coin that it's a myth that like, well, if you just went to therapy, you'd be fine and all your problems would go away.
Yeah.
Like, I think that if you're not in a place where you don't think you'd get something out of therapy, like if it would make you more uncomfortable and shut you down further to try and sit in front of a counselor for 50 minutes and, you know, whatever, and it's easier to start working on those things with a friend.
Yes.
Like, I think that is also legitimate. And I think we can train ourselves like as friends, as members of the church to be active listeners, to be wise counselors. I think when you were talking about pastors and being close to the Holy Spirit, it really just got me thinking about how like, yes, like we give people the title of pastor, like people are literally appointed that and like that is their job title, but also like you can be called to be a pastor and not have the title of being a pastor. Like you can be a pastor in someone's life and not be like Pastor so-and-so from this church. Like you can be pastoring someone in their life and be close to the Holy Spirit and give what you have to that person. But I think it's that balance of like, just because you have the leader role doesn't mean that you have all the answers, but also just because you don't have the leader role doesn't mean you don't have something to offer to the people in your life. And I think that it's really important to be in tune with the Holy Spirit of like, when do I not have the tools to help this person? When should I recommend, hey, friend,
I'm not it.
You are, I'm not it. You need help beyond what I can offer you, versus like, hey, like I know I'm just your friend or I'm just your whatever, but like I really feel like this is what God is saying to you. And I think that when we're in tune with the Holy Spirit, we can more actively fulfill those roles and not be so caught up in like, well, go to your pastor and they'll know everything about everything for you. Like it's important to have a bit of everything. You know?
No, it's so true, and it's very beautifully said. So awesome. I also had Eric actually wrote the question of, should my therapist be a Christian?
This one, I love this question.
I know. Me too. I loved it. I'll go ahead. Okay. You have your answer.
I feel like I'm going first a lot. Is that okay?
No, because I keep on. If I wanted to, I just answer first.
Okay,
so,
cool. No, I have had several different experiences with Christian counselors, with non-Christian counselors. I've had a whole gamut of things, of therapy type experiences, and they have all been great in so many ways and not been great in so many ways. Which is another just little tidbit to know, is that whoever you're seeing, whoever a therapist, a counselor, a pastor, they are just a person, and they are not going to be perfect, and they are not going to solve all your problems.
So true.
Just want to put that out there. But I wrestle with this a lot, because I have seen Christian counselors who just impacted my life so deeply and changed my relationship with God and led me through some really, really difficult seasons. But like, there came a point where they weren't able to help me in the way that I felt that I needed help. With just depression, and people who have experienced depression know that sometimes it's just out of your control. Like, there's situational depression, like something traumatic or bad happens to you and you experience depression as a reaction to that. And then there's just your brain isn't making enough of the chemicals it needs to, and there's no real reason, and you just can't get out of it. And I was going through some of that, and my Christian counselor, while being super supportive and wonderful and absolutely everything that she could be to me, couldn't be there in that place that I needed her to be in that way. And then I've been to see in a different season of my life, but where I was also struggling with depression. Spoiler alert, I struggle with chronic depression. In another season of my life where I was going through depression, I went and saw a non-Christian counselor and learning more about cognitive behavioral therapy and learning to stop thought spirals. I really struggled with thought. I'm sure there's a more scientific name for it, but in my mind, I just call it a thought spiral. Like I would just get fixated on things and not be able to calm my brain down.
Yeah.
And she really coached me through practical, like tips of how to like stop your thought spirals. And it's like, whoa, this is actually like works. And it was super, super helpful in helping me get through the day. And, I got on medication while I was with that doctor or with that therapist. But there also came a point with that therapist where her worldview was so different from mine that when I would talk about how important my relationship with God was to me, or talk about how I was struggling with my relationship with God, her advice felt just wrong to me. Like, because we saw the world differently. Like, she was very respectful of my views, very respectful that I said that God was really important to me and my relationship with God was really important to me. But it ultimately came down to my relationship with God was part of who I am. And me, I'm more important than my relationship with God. And obviously my worldview is that like my relationship with God is central to who I am. And I ended up stopping seeing her because I felt like while the skills she had taught me were really, really helpful, I wasn't able to then, I'd hit a point where my growth had kind of tapped out of like, all right, I've got these skills and she's just kind of teaching me how to like cope with my depression through my life, and I want to experience like healing. Like I want to experience growth out of this. I want my relationship with God to flourish. And that wasn't something she was able to help me with. Again, your therapist, your counselor, whoever, they're not going to be able to help you with everything. Like this is not a diss on any of these people. Like there's just a limit to how much you are able to offer to one person. And so in that season, seeing somebody who their objective was not to, I know, this is going to sound so horrible, but their objective was not to make me more like Jesus. Their objective was to help me survive. Help me get through another day. And to be honest, like I hadn't found that in Christian circles where it was like, all right, get through your depression so that you can get back to serving Jesus. And it wasn't about like, hey, like you're telling me that you're contemplating taking your own life. Like let's scientifically work through what your brain is like. That just like, I strongly believe that our spiritual selves and our physical selves are completely intertwined. And I do think that so many things are spiritual and physical, but like maybe other people could relate to this too, but there was just times in my depression where I was like, I don't want you to tell me
oh my gosh,
that Jesus loves me and that everything's gonna be okay. Like I can't hold that right now.
Well, if like you said, if it's so intertwined, then the spiritual also can't just fix everything. We also have to use some of the physical in that. And I think a lot of times when it's all just the Christian fundamentals that we're given, then we're not given any of the real life stuff, and we're not being able to work with any of that, and we're just like, okay, this is great, but I can only take this so far. I can only read this verse so many times. I can only, take this so far. And that, I don't think that has anything to do with your level of relationship with God, with your level of how much God loves you or how much you love God, how much you're reading the Bible, how much you're praying. And I'm speaking to myself because I've had these conversations with myself. Like if I were only to do more, I should be able. Why is God not like fixing these problems for me? If he says in the Bible, like in his word, that if I do these things, like this healing would happen. Well, he also created these steps and these people and this medication and for these reasons also. Like it's a whole thing. It's not either or. And I think a lot of times maybe the church forgets that when we're struggling with these things. It's like it's all spiritual or nothing. And that can be kind of detrimental sometimes.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that when I was looking over the notes, like I kept thinking about is like, because I don't know how to express this, but our emotions and our mental health are expressed a lot of times in the same way that our spiritual stuff is. Like it's all going on internally and we express it outwards. But I believe that they're different. Like even in the Bible, like Jesus differentiates between your mind and your body and your spirit. Like all of those are like, love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your body, like with all your spirit, with all your soul. And like that's a differentiation of things that are going on.
Yeah.
And so I think that I think all things are spiritual in a sense, but I think that like we have a mind and we have a brain, and our emotions come from, in some ways, our brain. And I feel like the church especially has a tendency to interpret emotions and mental health as a result of your spiritual self, which like they can be sometimes,
right?
But it's like, well,
or just a piece of it,
right? But it's like, if you're depression, well, we need to solve this with a spiritual thing. And again, I fully believe like spiritual solutions are great. Like I do think that, but it is like my mind. If my mind is sick, like obviously, I believe God's spirit is a solution to all things. Right. But like if it's a mind issue and not a spirit issue, what does that mean? And people just want to, I think, put a Band-Aid over all of those things of like mind, heart, soul. It's all kind of the same, and we're just going to Bible verse it up. And like for me personally, my brain, in this broken world that we live in, where people are born with chronic issues, where people are born with deformities, where people have terrible things happen to them and have to deal with those things for the rest of their lives. Like one of the things that I've had to deal with is depression, and it's because of my brain and the way that my brain works. And it was inhibiting me from even being able to function in the spiritual. Which like if you have, I have not experienced this, so I'm not trying to speak for anyone who has experienced it, but I think about it in terms of like chronic pain. Like, you know, I've known people in my life who have dealt with chronic pain. And like when you're in that much pain, like it's hard to focus on other things. Right. And so it's like, I don't know, we have room in our minds for like people who have physical ailments and physical things going on. But we, for some reason, don't have room for people who have chronic like mental issues that are because of a different part of their body, their brains. Right. And we don't seem to have like an understanding that those things are different. And like you can have depression as a result of your spiritual stuff or spiritual warfare or, you know, whatever it is. But I also think that depression can be a manifestation of a broken body living in a broken world.
That's very true.
Yeah, I don't know how to tie that up.
No. And like I think my experience, when I said that I was going to like basically all of my input is from my experience, it's so like I've struggled with depression in and out of my life. It really hasn't been constant. But like I remember the first time I struggled with it was when I was a teenager. And the stupidest thing, I was such a goody two shoes. I told a lie to my parents, and I think I was like 12. I can't remember. I was so distraught that I told them a lie. It literally ate me up to the point that like I felt so bad about it that it made me depressed, that I didn't want to like get out of bed, and I didn't know that's what it was. But like they took me to the doctor. They were like, they thought I was sick for like weeks because I was just like, so I don't know. I just like, that's how I took that in, that guilt of it. So that was like the first, and that was like a very like outside experience that made me depressed. And then the many years went on. I would say I would have like seasons of depression, but my family was very much the depression's in your head. It's made up. It's all perspective. You can control it. So I honestly can't even tell you, because I very much thought that like seasonal depression isn't a thing. Depression really isn't a thing. It's just all based off of how I'm thinking in the moment. So I had sad times throughout my life. I don't know if I would even call them depression, but obviously when my parents passed, I went through a pretty hard year, I would say, where like that depression experience was like zero motivation. I just had no drive to do anything. It wasn't even like, I've heard people describe it of like they don't want to get out of bed or take a shower. Like I didn't have problems really doing that, but I just had like, I'm a very goal-oriented person. I had no goals. I had no inspiration for anything. And that I could tell was a big deal during that time. And what I wanted to sleep all the time and all that stuff. But about a year after that, I went through grief therapy and everything. But the weirdest shift was after I had Joe and I had postpartum depression, which was the craziest experience because that was very chemical for me. I wasn't sad about anything externally. I was sad about it was all internal. And I had zero control over it. And it effed with my mind. I'm trying really hard not to cuss right now. I'm really bad about it on the show. But it messed with me. And because, like I said, I was very much brought up of like, you control this, like you have this outlook on your life. And when I had zero control, and I told Eric eventually I would like to do an episode based off of just depression. So I don't want to get too heavy into this. I know we have a therapy podcast, or episode, but that there's just so many differences between all of it. But the postpartum for me was just like, I don't know, it was just so different between like just everything external happening to that internal, like you were saying, of like just something in my mind wasn't working and I had zero control over it. And I literally felt crazy. And still, I mean, she's about to turn a year, and I'm, still struggling with not even really the depression part of it, but just like the other areas of just that postpartum comes with all of that and the ebbs and flows of it. But it is a crazy experience, and I think there are the external and the internals, and to kind of go back into like actual therapy and therapist, like talking about what a healthy therapist looks like you were saying, like they kind of go all over the place. They don't technically really have to be Christian, depending on the season in your life and kind of what you need. Like during the grief counseling, during that time after my parents, like I've talked about it previously, but he wasn't a Christian. I do not think I needed a Christian during that time. I think if somebody would have told me that it all happened for a reason, I would have told them that they could shove that advice somewhere, and I would have ran probably further from God than where I already was at that time. So I think God knew exactly what he was doing in that moment. But eventually I think you get to a place that you want your morals to align. And but even now, like I'm going to a therapist. She's a Christian. I love her. She's super sweet. This is going to sound horrible. She's almost overly Christian about our therapy, for my personality anyways. I think she's great for certain people. I'm sure she's out there for somebody. But I'm kind of thinking about maybe switching up, which this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, of like, if there's somebody out there listening to this, maybe you've had a bad experience with a therapist. Maybe it was your only experience and you're like, I don't really want to ever try this again. I would say try it again. They're used to people like firing them and going to other people because you just didn't vibe with them. I don't think they take that personally at all. I think that, I mean, like I've been through 4 or 5 of them, some for personal reasons, some for insurance reasons. You can always just blame it on something else if you need to. But I don't think that they care. And I believe that the right person is the right counselor or therapist is out there for somebody if they just give it a shot. And I think that if somebody is wanting to experience that, you'll know the right fit when you get into the room and you're vibing with that person.
Well, in a way it's similar in that sense to any other relationship of like there's just people that it's easier to get along with. There's just different people that you're more comfortable with for whatever reason. And yeah, I think I've also had experiences with I don't want to get into this because it's a whole different thing. It's not counseling. It's called spiritual direction. It's a whole other thing.
Okay.
But I was seeing a spiritual director for a while, and I had to stop seeing her because I could not be open with her because she was just very like gushy about everything. Yeah. And I would like be telling her about these issues that I was going through, and she would just cry. And she would just be like, "You're just so brave. You're just so courageous." And like being very encouraging. Yes. But I'm like, I don't want you to cry. Right. Like this is my time. Right. Like, what do you mean? Yeah. Anyway, she was very sweet and again, like loved the Lord. Yeah. But it just wasn't the right fit for me. Yeah. And my favorite therapist that I've ever seen is like this middle-aged man who is just so different than me, and just like honestly, I don't know if we would get along in real life, but as a therapist client, we meshed.
I know, right?
And I think that it is, like we were talking about earlier, cost is daunting, and having to go through the kind of the dating period with a therapist and then possibly having to switch is daunting. Like I think that turns a lot of people off. Yeah. But I think it's so worth the process if you're really thinking that therapy is something that you need and something that you're willing to invest in. Yeah. Because that's the other thing is I think, sorry, I'm going off on like 10,000 rabbit trails, but I think people go into therapy expecting their therapist to fix them. Yeah. Of like, all right, I'm going to show up and this person's going to tell me what to do and fix me and everything's going to be perfect. I'm not saying everyone thinks that, but I think that a lot of people have a similar attitude, and really therapy is you choosing to invest in yourself and like choosing to be self-reflective and have someone else guide you through that. Yeah. So that's another note. If like if you're ready to like get down to your own stuff, therapy is a great option. If you're wanting someone else to coddle you and tell you what to do with your life, therapy's not for you. Right. I mean, therapy's for everyone, but that kind of therapy isn't for you. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth trying on a couple different therapists, finding somebody who you're comfortable with, right? Or even someone who challenges you. Like I was just saying, like I don't know if my most recent therapist, who I love, like if we met somewhere, if we would just become good friends. Like he's like a middle-aged bald man, and you know, like kind of not mean, but just kind of gruff and like a little more direct. Right. You just need to be like tossed like, around as a therapist. Like he's just like straightforward with me, and I need that. Like I needed someone who's a little bit different than I am. So like someone who challenges you but also makes you feel comfortable and seen, and that they actually want to like spend time with you. Right. That's another thing. This is again a little bit of a side tangent. I have been with therapists who made me feel like they didn't like me and like they didn't want to be in the room with me. Wow, and that's just gonna happen. You know, like therapists are people too. They're not gonna like everyone they come into contact with. Hopefully they don't make you feel that way. Right. But like that's probably not encouraging people to go to therapy. But you know, like, no, you just don't want to be in the room with someone who you feel like you're annoying them with your problems. So
and like that's the part of that is like you said, going through that dating period. I think like when I also like, if anybody is curious about the therapy process, for me anyways, this has been my experience. I'm a Zoom girl. I like doing it online. I know like that's not how most people like to do it, but I have a baby. I don't like really getting out of the house and driving and trying, like it takes up most of my day. So I just like hopping on the computer and I get everything I need out of it just through the computer. So if that's a great way to go about it if your schedule's kind of crazy. But you can also do it the traditional, like in the room, lay on the couch if you want.
That is so my vibe. I'm like, give me like an afternoon to myself. My first experience like actually going to like real therapy, it was on Friday afternoons, and so I would get off work and I would get a smoothie from Smoothie King. They have $5 Fridays. And I'd get my smoothie and I'd go to therapy. And I would laugh at myself because I'm like, it's like therapy. It literally was therapy. But like having that time to myself to like, for me, the opposite of like actually getting out of the house, going and having time where someone is focused solely on you. And like, what do you need?
And you're focused on you.
Yeah. Right. And it was life-changing. Like it was just absolutely life-changing. So whatever sounds more appealing to you, staying home in your cozies or getting out and getting a smoothie.
Like, and that, I think that's it's very, I don't know if that's always been the case or if COVID kind of brought that into the world, but that's a great option. Now, I don't know if I would have been so inclined to do it because I never did therapy until my parents passed, which was after COVID. So I've never done therapy other than on the computer. Me and Eric, well, I take that back. Me and Eric did marriage counseling back in 2017-ish. So, but that was a weird experience. So, but that was in person. So, but like anytime that I've started with a counselor, it has always started like once a week, once every other week. That kind of depends on money, time schedule, but pretty frequent. And then when I get to the oil changing part of my therapy session, I'm literally talking like once a month, once every other month, sometimes once every 6 months. And like the girl that I was seeing that we had a really good relationship, I was like seeing her maybe once every 2 months or so. And like we would just pick up like right where I left off and go over like my 2 months really wasn't that crazy or anything. And like I said, it was just like a routine little checkup and everything. And so I don't think like it has to be this big pressure either of like you have to go like, and it's forever going to be this weekly cost for the rest of your life or anything like this. Once you have that established relationship and what you need out of it and everything, it can become something. And like I said, it's all about seasons. It's all about what you need out of that time, what you're getting out of that person. And I don't know, it's kind of a cool experience. So, going on to our next point, which I think we both will have pretty strong feelings about. Anybody who feels guilty about going to therapy or maybe ashamed of it. And we kind of touched on this already about I should just spend more time with Jesus. I think the only thing that I will kind of add to this, we specifically named this episode Jesus and therapy. Like you can have both. And I specifically just want anybody listening to understand that if you are struggling and you're a Christian and you feel like you're not reading enough or praying enough or anything, that you can go to church and you can have your friends and you can read the Bible and go to therapy. But I just wanted to see if you had anything else to add for anybody who might feel the guilt of needing it.
You know, I don't know if you want me to hold my thoughts on medication until a later point.
We'll go ahead and talk about it.
Because to me, I feel like a lot of that goes hand in hand. But what I will just say is I am not like theologically sorted out or perfect or have really great curated opinions. I am just another person on this floating rock trying to figure out everything.
Right.
So I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes or make any grand statements. I am a person trying to make it through life. Right. And if you're watching this, I want to, hopefully help you try to make it through life.
Right.
So I know people have a lot of differing opinions, and I feel like that's part of where some of the guilt comes from, is people have really strong feelings about, like I said, like dealing with emotional, mental issues in a spiritual way. Yeah. And any other way is unacceptable. And I feel like there is an attitude of that in certain areas of the church. And I just, if I'm speaking to just the public,
like, go for it.
If I'm just the public, right? No, but one thing that I think was really, honestly, like kind of a bombshell for me. Like, I know this is gonna sound so dumb, but I remember my mom telling me that, like, I was crying and we were having like this emotional conversation. I was in the throes of just dealing with some emotional stuff. And my mom was like, like God doesn't want you to be depressed. Like, and that like blew my mind for some reason. Like, I just had this idea that like God was testing me, or this was some kind of like, like some kind of test or some kind of trial that he was putting me through.
Right.
And he didn't really care how I felt or my experience. He wanted to know if I was going to trust him, if I was going to do the right things. And my mom was like, like, God just, like, his heart for you is not for you to live this way. Mm-hmm. His heart for you is not for you to live depressed.
Yeah.
And it just shook me because that was just not my conception of what God was doing in my life. And I think that God is just not going to be upset at you for getting the help you need.
Yeah.
I don't think God is going to be upset at you for seeking wise counsel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to say, like, oh, just have faith that God will heal you. And I think that doesn't exclude taking measures that are available to you in your resources. Like, I think you can have faith that God will heal you and take steps to get through your day.
Yeah.
And sort of bridging into, like I said, like, my opinions with this and with medication kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really, really struggled with getting on medication.
Yeah.
I didn't want to for a really long time.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear that I needed to be on it, and
mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so crazy because my parents are both super supportive of that. My dad's a doctor. My mom's a counselor. They were like, get on medication.
Yeah.
And my husband's super supportive. He's also a healthcare professional.
Yeah.
And I just really was like, I haven't felt like God's okay on this thing. And I was always taught, like, you wait for God to give you a yes or a no.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to theologically step on any toes. I'm not saying that's not correct.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Take it with a grain of salt. But I just was like, well, I haven't felt like God said yes or no.
Yeah.
And I was dying. I was like, I know that sounds dramatic, but I was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, if I don't change something, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And so I made the choice to get on medication, and I felt so guilty just because I was like, whoa, like, I am not trusting God with my life here.
Yeah.
But I was so scared.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to take any chances. So I got on medication and I started feeling better. And again, like, I'm tainted by my own personal experiences. I'm not theologically perfect in this, but I saw that medication, first of all, didn't heal me of anything.
Yeah.
It helped me get my head above water.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Think a little clearer.
Yeah. Like, to just be able to even, like, tell left from right.
Yeah.
And that put me in a different place with my relationship with God. My mental health was precluding me. I don't know if that's the right word. It sounded fancy, but
it sounds right.
It was keeping me
yeah.
from being able to connect with God in that way.
Yeah.
And again, like, theologically, it's confusing to me because I'm like, well, God can, like, break through anything. He can break through depression. He can break through whatever. And, like, that's something I still struggle with. I don't know why God hasn't chosen to heal me miraculously overnight in an instant. But I have faith that he's doing something with this in my life. Yeah. And that making a decision to take care of my body and take care of my brain is something that he's empowered me to do through the Spirit in me, through the brain that he's given me to make decisions. Yeah. And I remember talking to my counselor and telling him how guilty I felt about going on medication. And he was like, this is not a spiritual issue. Like, this is a health issue. Yeah. Like, you wouldn't pray about getting a life-saving blood transfusion. You would just do it. Right. And again, I'm not trying to say if you have a different feeling theologically, I'm not trying to stamp on you. But I think that remembering that God, his heart for you is not depression, even if he's allowing it in a season for whatever reason, and we don't always know what that is. Yeah. His heart for you is not to just live depressed. Yeah. And he's empowered you to make medical decisions for yourself. Yeah. And making steps towards health is not distrust in his healing. It is saying, like, medication is just part of treating this issue, but I still need your Spirit to heal me. Yeah. Like, I was able to get my head above water because of medication, but I still had self-hatred. Like, those self-hatred things that bloomed in my depression were still there. Yeah. But I was able to see them clearer when all of the muddy thoughts and feelings had kind of dissipated. Right. I was able to see the, like, you know, trauma and the things that were affecting me more clearly. And I need Jesus to heal those things too. Yeah. You know, like, it's not one or the other. Yeah. Just like you were saying, it's Jesus and therapy. It's Jesus and taking care of yourself. It's not one or the other. Like, he has empowered you to take care of yourself and to make decisions out of wisdom, out of wise counsel, to better yourself.
Yeah. No, that's so beautiful, because that is something that I even struggle with right now. Because throughout all the seasons of the depression that I've felt, I've always been able to work my way out of it. I didn't use God helped me through it, obviously, but I'm also a worker. I'd go on walks, or I'd put another goal, and it wasn't medication, but it wasn't just Jesus either helping me through my depression. It was me doing just something to get me through it, and I normally could get myself through it. But with postpartum, I was not able to. And by like 3 months of it, I even got to the point of, I looked at Eric, and I didn't want to kill myself, but I told him that I was going to leave because everybody would be better off if I wasn't here. And I told myself I wasn't going to cry, but I was just at a really low spot that I felt like I wasn't able to take care of Joe, and I was a burden to everybody that I was around, and all the things that happened during that, that time in your life. And I was still going through therapy, thank God, from my previous experiences. And I was kind of hashing this out with my therapist, and she was like, girl, go talk to your doctor. So I talked to her. They didn't even hesitate and were like, we need to get you on some medication. It's very obvious that this is postpartum depression, and I got the pill bottle, and I looked at it for about 2 weeks, and I was just like, I could not get myself to take it. And I don't know, you just don't know why it's so hard, like that guilt that you feel for having to take it. The weakness that you feel for having that. I couldn't work my way out of it. I couldn't do anything to get myself. I couldn't read enough. I couldn't go on walks enough. I couldn't take care of my baby enough. I couldn't do anything to get myself out of it this time. I needed, a pill to help me to get through this, and I just couldn't get myself to admit to that. And finally, I had a conversation with Eric, and kind of the same, conversation that you were talking about, of like, when you're sick, you don't hesitate to take a NyQuil, but here you are, like having this discussion with this, and you're literally talking about getting in the car and never seeing your daughter again. Like, this is leaps and bounds. Like, I don't understand why we're having this conversation right now. So I took it, and it did make me feel better. It made me feel clearer. The only thing that I did not like about it was it was Zoloft, and it kind of, I don't know, it kind of made me numb to a lot of emotions.
It kind of blunted everything, yeah.
So I wasn't super thrilled about all of that, but I needed something, and it definitely helped me enjoy the next couple of months of Joe's life, which I'm very, very thankful for. And like you said, I was able to read my Bible again. I had the energy to talk to God again. I had the energy to go to church again. I had the energy to do all this stuff and build a relationship again. I'm most thankful just to be a present mom, mostly during that year. And So after a couple months, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to get off of it. I think I'm good. I think I'm good. And I came off of it. And I did fine for like 3 months, I think. And all of a sudden, like, life starts getting crazy and my emotions just start going all over the place. And doctors immediately like, you need to get back on to medication. And I was like, I don't want Zoloft. I definitely don't want that. So they prescribed me with another medication. And again, just that guilt and even now, I've been on it for a couple weeks now. And I wish I had more encouraging words to give people who are listening right now. But I feel like I'm in the same spot that maybe somebody is in right now. I feel weak. I feel like I should be strong enough to not need it. That I should have been able to do something to get myself out of it. And again, like I said, if anybody were to come to me with any of these problems, I would be like, you're crazy, just take the medicine.
You wouldn't hesitate.
I would not hesitate, and that's what, I don't want to make anybody feel guilty or anybody feel embarrassed for, while they're listening to this, because I wouldn't hesitate. If you were to tell me that, I'd be like, you're crazy. You are the strongest person for even admitting that you need it,
Right.
The total opposite. But for some reason, for me personally, I'm like, I'm different. I should be strong enough. I show weakness because I need it. I should have, God's special mercy on my life, and I think that's where I have that turmoil in my life. And like I said, I wish I had some magical words that I could sprinkle into this podcast right now to tell you what to, help people out. But the only thing I can say is, like, I just try to think about myself as like advice that I would give somebody else, and not just, being so hard on myself about it, it is hard not to I don't know, be judgmental even to myself of like, you're crazy, like, look at your life. You should be so grateful and you're on antidepressants. So it's just, I don't know. It's a hard one that I struggle with. I will shout from the rooftops that I go to therapy. I will, but the medication got me.
It's really tricky. And like I was kind of alluding to earlier, I don't know if I was making any sense, but like, I was raised in a church environment where people prayed for instantaneous healing. It was more charismatic, and you prayed for God to heal things instantly. And I've seen people get healed, and it feels wrong to me, like, that trained feeling to just accept defeat in a way of like, God didn't heal my depression instantaneously, and now I've just given up.
Right.
Like, now I've just given in to the devil.
This is what he wanted.
And like, even going forward with my treatment of treating my depression not as a season of my life, but more of like a chronic issue that I have. And making that shift was really hard for me, but it has completely changed my life, given me so much more grace for myself. But again, there's that sort of just like religious guilt of like, well, God's supposed to like heal me. Why isn't he healing me? Or why am I not having this crazy faith that he's going to do this thing? Why am I not like experiencing this thing, like walking in fullness of the Spirit of, just faith that he's going to change me? And those are questions that I don't really have answers for.
Right.
The things that I do know are that, like I keep saying, like, God's heart for me is not to live in a depressed state. He doesn't guarantee that those things won't happen or that I won't experience those things. That's not God's heart for me. And that he has grace for me. In where I'm at. And that may not be enough for some people, you know, like you're saying, there's no magical like words. Like I'm here for you if you're in that boat. That's like, I'm just trying to get through the day. I don't really understand fully what God, and no one ever fully understands what God is doing. Yeah. But like, like I'm struggling with carrying this for however long, or for the rest of my life, or however long you're however long you're going through what you're going through. Yeah.
I think like also just like you kind of said, like the grace of having having the same grace for the mental as you do the physical. You know, it is very hard, but I don't know where that disconnect, even in my life, I don't know where that disconnect is for me. Like if I had some form of disability, I wouldn't hesitate to go get crutches or something, or a wheelchair.
But it's funny what you were saying, because you were like, I would tell anybody else this, but for me, for some reason, I'm supposed to be strong.
Yes,
I'm supposed to be different.
I'm
and not
superior.
I don't know what that means about either of our personalities, but I feel you. Like I feel that too. Of like, no, like I'm supposed to be able to weather this in a different way. Yeah. And again, I don't feel like, like my guilty conscience. I don't even want to say guilty conscience, because it's not. Yeah. But just like those nagging, like intrusive, guilty thoughts that are like, well, you've given in, you've given up. And like, I absolutely have not given in or given up.
You're working.
I'm grabbing hold of my life. Yeah. You know, I am choosing to move forward despite not understanding fully what God is doing, maybe, or not being able to fully, I don't know, experience healing on this side of heaven in the way that I thought it would look like, with the instantaneous whatever. Yeah. Like, and I feel like for me, that's its own faith journey. You know, like I thought my faith journey with this was going to be like, well, I'm going to have faith that God's someday going to remove this thing completely from my brain. And he hasn't done that yet. Yeah. And so I'm having faith that like he's going to use me and work me. Yeah. And bless me in this life, and I'm gonna have faith in that, right, and continue to like treat myself well with the best of my abilities. So
I think that's beautiful. So I think I know we're probably going long. I am
so sorry.
No, I don't know. Probably me too.
I've been
what time is it?
Yapping. It's 7:22.
Okay. So the last question, I think this is kind of on a lighter note. Okay. What would you say to anybody who uses therapy as a crutch instead of a tool?
You know, this is such a great one to end on, because I'm about to piss so many people off.
Go for it.
No, I am 100, obviously, like a therapy advocate, mental health advocate, but we do live in such a weird world where it is so hyper fixated on, in a way. And like, there's some really good sides to that, of like bringing awareness. I think we're so much more aware
1,000%
of mental health now than we were 50 years ago. And I think that's such a gift. Like, I think there are so many blessings that come with that.
Yeah. That was part of, like, when I told Eric, I was like, I don't know why do I have to take medication? I was like no one in my family, no one before me ever had to take. And he's like,
my grandparents were just depressed.
Yeah. And Eric's like, and the suicide rate was like so much higher than it was before. Yeah. Just take the medication.
Our grandparents, my grandparents, like, didn't like their kids.
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah. It's like, we're so much happier now. Yeah, so please just
it's pretty crazy.
So anyway,
no, I do not want to downplay that, because I think it's incredible, and I'm so grateful to be living. Like, this is a side tangent. I was just talking to my mom about how like incredible it is that like even just 2 generations ago, like my quality of life is so much better than my grandmother, who struggled with depression and just had to struggle. Yeah. She just had to deal with it. Anyway, God bless you. Right. I love you, Grandma. You're the
best. Shout out to Grandma.
Shout out to Grandma. But I do think that there, on the flip end of that, is sort of a hyperfixation on getting a diagnosis, for some people getting on medication. I feel like it's the non-religious people mostly. I could be wrong, but I feel like the religious people are like, don't go on medication, you're fine. Yeah. And I feel like the non-religious people are like, go on as many medications as you possibly can. Get diagnosed for as many disabilities as you possibly can. And I do think, like, I think if most people go to therapy, they'll get diagnosed with something. Like, we all have something wrong with us.
Yeah, for real.
But I think that when you make your mental health and your mental issues specifically,
Mm-hmm.
not even just your mental health, but just the things that you're struggling with, when that becomes your identity,
Yeah.
I think that that's an issue. I think therapy should be a tool that helps you,
Mm-hmm.
but it should be a tool that helps you to live your life and
Yeah.
hopefully to someday need it less.
Yeah.
Medication should be a tool to help you live your life, not numb yourself out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are people who fall into their diagnosis as like, well, I have chronic depression.
Yeah.
Me having talked about having chronic depression for like this entire episode. Or I hear anxiety so much, like
Yeah.
so many sweet friends, like no, hey,
Yeah.
no, whatever. But just like people
Yeah.
who have canceled on me because it's like my anxiety is just too
Yeah.
high. And again, I'm not saying that it's not good to have boundaries, but it's just more of a thing now
Yeah.
where it's like you can just kind of use it as like
Yeah.
a pass.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm just too anxious for that.
Yeah.
Again, sorry to step on any
No,
toes, but
no.
whatever.
I like that question because it's so funny. I think it was a group effort that me and Eric wrote that question, but part of it stems from we're watching a lot of reality TV right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like to all my Love is Blind people out there right now. And it's being brought up a lot about like, oh, well, I'm in therapy, and it seems to be like a crutch for like any of the issues that they have. Like, well, they're in therapy about it. So like, it almost reminds me of like Enneagrams. Like, oh, I'm an Enneagram, whatever.
And it's
so,
just
like
an excuse.
yeah,
to
like
act
I can just be
a certain
however I am because I'm in therapy about it, you
Mhm.
know? And I just like, please don't be that
or it
way.
somehow makes you like seem self-aware without
Yeah.
actually having to be.
Yes.
And well, like that's the other thing is this is part of what makes therapy so great, but also then is abused in this way.
Yeah.
And I think going back all the way to the beginning,
Yeah.
I think it's a little different than like either counseling or pastoral counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Is your therapist, as a person who's going to school for it,
Mm-hmm.
your therapist, their job is to focus solely on you.
Yeah.
Their job is not to judge if you're lying
Mhm.
about other people in your life. Their job is to take you at your word
Mhm.
and help you with
Yeah.
the way you interpret the world.
Mhm.
Their job is not to judge if you're right
Yeah.
in your situation.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully, if you have a good therapist, they're going to challenge you and help you to be more kind if you're being not
Right.
kind. But like, that's part of what's so great about therapy is it's all about you.
Yeah.
You get to focus on you.
Yeah.
And your therapist is solely focused on you. They're not trying to make you see so-and-so's side
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, they're focused on you. And that can be a really great thing. But it can also, like, if you're just
Yeah.
a complete, like, asshole
Yeah.
and your therapist is just like, wow, that sounds so hard. Like,
Yes.
you know, like just being
Yeah.
so empathetic that they're not challenging you at
Yeah.
all. And I think that people go in to therapy
Yeah.
and, like, give themselves a pat on the back and just let themselves kind of be encouraged, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, therapy is supposed to be work for you.
Yes.
Like, you're supposed
Yeah.
to go into therapy willing to sort of self-explore and
Yeah.
figure out how am I going to better myself.
Yeah.
And I think people go in kind of just wanting a pep talk, maybe.
Right.
And so, like, specifically with Love is Blind people, like,
Yeah.
like I feel like it's just
Yeah.
instant. I'm a self-reflective person. I'm
Yes.
self-aware.
Yeah.
But also, like, you don't actually have to be honest about anything in your life because your therapist, their job is not to decide if you're right or wrong. Their job is to help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like they're not going to question you about anything. So
Right.
you can kind of just be a narcissist and just
Right.
kind of like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So thank you so much for being a part of all of this and for all your great insight. You were amazing. Like literally you help me, if anything, even if no one listens, you help me.
I am
So,
like every minute that passes, I'm like, oh my God, this is going so terribly. But
whatever.
I'm glad you think that it went well.
Right. Did we miss anything though? Is there anything else you want to add before I close this out?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed
Yeah.
getting into and I hope that as perfectly imperfect as
Yeah.
all of this stuff has come across, I hope that if you're listening to this and you are struggling with any of the things
Yeah.
that we've talked about, that it
Mhm.
encourages you to talk to somebody, whether that is just a friend in your life or
Yes. Yeah.
a
100%.
counselor, a pastor, a therapist, whoever fits the bill.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody.
If you're not vibing with somebody currently, find somebody new.
Yeah.
You know, you guys are always welcome to reach out to us. You can comment or DM us, or however you feel comfortable doing that. I'm sorry you guys were stuck with me today.
No.
If you hated it, Eric will be back next week, our next episode. So I promise. But as always, subscribe, follow, share, all of the annoying stuff that I have to say. We have merch, specifically the therapy is biblical.
Yeah.
So go check that out.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah, you should be able to see it.
Awesome.
If not, you there's like a whole thing you can click and you can go check it out. But again, thank you so much, Julia. And I hope this reached somebody. I hope that we didn't say anything that hurt anybody.
Did.
Yeah, I know.
Have grace for
right.
us.
Yeah.
Have grace for me, please.
A whole lot of grace. If not, we're in therapy about it.
We're working on it.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you guys so much, and peace.